friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today for another Monday this and that video. And if you're new, these are the type of videos where I talk about a whole bunch of different topics, not just what I can squeeze into the thumbnail and the title. A lot of times I'm also answering questions that have come in through the past week and just giving you updates on the garden and various other things going on. So let's get to the topics of today. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the mango vinegar. Now, this video is not about how to make mango vinegar because I have a long playlist of how to make vinegar out of many different things. I just wanted to cover a few things and some questions on this. So I'm just showing you that I did get some mangoes from Misfits Market, and I'm using the skins and the pits to make mango vinegar. And this actually does make a really great vinegar. You can also mix these things with other types of peels, be it apple, pear, cores, pits. And no, I'm not worried about the so-called toxicity of these things. They're not going to harm you. In fact, I had a video come out fairly recently about the benefits of mango peels as well as the leaves and the kernels of the mango, which I finally did try. That was one of the reasons I wanted to make sure I got some mango so I could try that kernel. I won't do it again. It tasted horrible, but at least now I know. But it is very healthy for you. And if you want to learn more about the benefits of all these things, please check out the video I'll be putting in the description box below. But some people think that mango peels are toxic. They are not. A lot of people just eat them. And I do sometimes still eat a little bit of the peel. Mostly I will use the peels for making vinegar, but not everybody should eat the peels because some people are allergic to it, like they're allergic to poison ivy. So they could have a bad reaction eating the peels, but I know plenty of people, including myself, that have no problem with it. So with that in mind, I wanted to cover a few other things, questions that I keep getting, especially lately. And what I'm going to do is link to the video I did, the most thorough one I know I did that's in the list, on how to make vinegar. And that was where I was actually using chunks of fruit instead of just scraps like I usually do. And I tried to be as thorough as possible in that. So you can go watch that video if you want to learn how to make vinegar. But to answer some questions that I get commonly, when you get your vinegar started, just like this here, it should start bubbling within just a few days. And you can see the top of this. You can see some bubbles on top. It's very fizzy. It's only been going for a few days. And then I also make sure I stir that, or at least push the fruit down every day. What that's going to do is going to help prevent mold. Anything that's floating above the surface, that's going to prevent mold from forming on that. You won't get mold inside the vinegar, but you will get it on anything that's floating above the surface if you don't stir it down every day. You can use weights if you want. I find them expensive and pointless, and they also prevent good oxygen exposure to the vinegar, which is also necessary. But simply doing the stir down, I just like to use a chopstick every day, at least once a day, or even every other day a lot of times. That will not only help kind of release the bubbles that want to build up in there and cause things to overflow, it will prevent mold from forming on top. Each vinegar is going to be a little unique from each other, but approximately at the 2-week mark, it will stop bubbling. And a lot of people think, oh no, it's not fermenting anymore, and they kind of freak out and think they did something wrong. No, that's absolutely right. That's what it should do. Sometimes it might go on for 3 weeks. It's going to depend on how much sugar is in your whole mixture. So even when I'm using, very sweet mango peels that still have chunks of fruit that's pretty sweet, I'm still going to add about a 1/3 cup of sugar to this. I vary the amounts I add. I don't use any specific amount per weight because I'm not going to know exactly how much sugar is in each piece of fruit I put in there. So I always am approximate. If I'm using fruit that has a lot of sugar in it, I'm only going to put a 1/4 cup in a 1/2 gallon jar. Like when I made the vinegar from the apple chunks, that's going to have a lot more sugar than just using the peels. So I only used a 1/4 cup. If I'm using scraps like this, I'm going to do about a 1/3 cup of sugar. If I'm making vinegar out of herbs that have no sugar, I'm going to use about a 1/2 cup. And no, I do not, even though in some of my older videos I mentioned possibly adding more sugar at a certain point, I don't even do that, because the problem with that is if you wait too long to add more sugar, you're going to just bring the whole process to a stop. So this is a common question I get when people don't immediately see a SCOBY forming on top. Oh, do I add more sugar? When the bubbling stops, do I add more sugar? No, you don't, because these, not every vinegar you make is going to form a SCOBY on top. And a lot of times the SCOBYs don't even form. That's that little thick gelatinous mat that forms on the top. A lot of times it doesn't even form until after you've strained it out, it's all finished, and you put it away in storage with an airtight lid. But typically for me, I get SCOBYs on my apple and peach vinegars all the time, but rarely get them on my herbal vinegars. Sometimes I'll get them, they can be very paper thin, but that doesn't mean the vinegar is bad just because it doesn't form one. And it doesn't mean it's bad because it does. Now, I also have a video I did on what's on my vinegar. I'll put a link to that. I just did that one, I think, last year, down below, because when people are making vinegar, you're going to see various different things possibly forming on the top. And so I took some pictures and put that in there so people can know what's what, and did some explanations if you want to know. But for some reason, every time something goes wrong with somebody's vinegar, or they see something different happening, they automatically think, oh, I need to add more sugar. Nope, that's the least likely thing you need to do. Because especially if you're at the 2-week mark, anywhere from the 2-week mark and on is the worst time to add more sugar. If you want to, make a stronger vinegar by having more sugar in it, then too much sugar at the beginning can prevent it from fermenting in the first place. But you can add more sugar in the process, but I would say only within the first week. Only once it starts getting very, very bubbly, and don't put too much in at a time, maybe just 1/4 cup. And every time you add more sugar, it's going to extend the whole process out longer, though. Just keep that in mind, because the vinegar, the bacteria and the yeast has to eat through that sugar. So the more sugar that's in there, the more sugar it has to eat through before it can turn it to acetic acid, and that's where you get your vinegar. But it will yield a stronger, more acidic vinegar at the end. I just don't add sugar later in the process myself. But again, only sometime within the first week at the very latest, and I would say maybe a day after it really gets bubbly. And then the other thing is, constantly get emails and comments with questions asking, can I make vinegar out of this? Can I make vinegar out of that? Can I make vinegar out of that? My answer is simply this. If it's edible, yes, you can. You can make vinegar out of pretty much anything. Now, I don't know about animal-based products. I have never tried that, and I'm not interested. But when it comes to any kind of produce or herbs, it doesn't matter if it's a fruit or a vegetable or even oregano and garlic. Yes, you can do that. You just have to adjust your sugar amounts according to the things that you're putting in there. If they don't have sugar in them, you need to add more sugar. If they have a lot of sugar, you use less sugar, but you still need to have some sugar to get a good strong vinegar. If it has kind of a moderate amount of sugar, the items you're putting in there, then use a moderate amount of sugar. So somewhere between 1/4 cup and 1/2 cup. Some people actually put a whole cup in, a 1/2 gallon right off the bat. I personally don't recommend that, because starting off with that much sugar in a 1/2 gallon could prevent it from going through the full process. So I say start with a 1/2 cup and add a little more in a few days. Only once it starts bubbling though. Okay, don't add it before it starts bubbling. Okay, now the next thing I wanted to talk about was growing potatoes. Now, I was going to say this in last week's video when I was doing garden updates, and I was talking about planting my potatoes and taking the chicken bedding and putting it down where the potatoes are. I do that every year. I had learned years ago that potatoes actually like acidic soil. As such, I've always piled things like grass clippings and the bedding from the chicken's coop. And I posted some of these updates on freesteading, and somebody came in there and said, pig manure is the best for potatoes. You shouldn't use chicken manure because you'll end up with few potatoes and they'll be very small. Well, that's not my experience. And I don't have pigs, so I don't have pig manure to use. So what I have is chicken manure, and then, like I said, grass clippings can be very hot, can make the soil rather acidic. We pile them on high on top of our potatoes. We'll go down to the other piece of property down here. When Pat mows it, we go rake that up, bring it home and throw it on the potatoes and pretty much any other area in the garden. But on the potatoes is where we put it the thickest. And ever since we've been doing that, my potatoes do even better than they did before. And here's an example. Last year, I grew red potatoes for the first time, expecting them to be about that big. But here's a couple of pictures showing you an example of what the kind of red potatoes I pulled out of the ground. And I got a lot like that. And then same thing with my yellow potatoes. Not only did we have all the chicken bedding in there, but we also piled grass clippings on there. And I got some pretty good size. Some of the biggest yellow potatoes I got were last year out of that section. And so all that is to say, you got to find and do what's going to work best for you. And maybe my methods aren't going to work in your climate and with your soil. Maybe the person who's putting pig manure on theirs already has very acidic soil, and so pig manure is best. Personally, I would not put pig manure on anything. I can see using goat, rabbit, and those kind of things being very good, and those aren't near as hot. So if you're looking at things that don't like an acidic soil or things that are too hot, then you're going to go for your rabbit or your goat, or even, anything with hair, basically. But things from feathered animals is going to be hotter. So anyway, just find what works best for you. Again, it's all going to depend on your climate, your soil conditions, and what it is you're trying to grow. And don't, just because somebody says, even me, if they say that's the way they do it and that's what works for them, it doesn't mean that's right for all. Just like any medicinal herbs, this will work better for this person, and this herb here will work better for that person for the same thing. So if we're talking about pain, maybe somebody does better on wild lettuce, while somebody else does better with feverfew, while somebody else does better with valerian or lemon balm or ginger or turmeric. It doesn't matter. Everybody's going to be unique. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. That is what works for me. So now moving on, one thing I wanted to bring up is that through the years, even though we're not in the, and forgive me, I'm just going to use the titles that I know the best that will make people understand what I'm talking about. Is I've not been a part of the Torah observant movement or the Hebrew roots movement, and whatever it is, they all have different names for themselves if they put themselves under a title. I personally, if you watch my faith-based video I did, the more recent one, you'll know I don't try not to title myself under anything, but we do have a lot in common in some certain things that we look at. And for me, it's been a struggle with trying to work in taking a Saturday day of rest. This is part of the 10 Commandments, and it is something I believe we all need. Whether you believe in the Bible or not, I think we all need a day of rest. We are designed to have a day of rest. And when we're constantly pushing ourselves mentally and physically 7 days a week, then you're going to have burnout, and it's going to start taking a toll on your health. And so this is why I believe God put that Sabbath day, and why God set the example of taking that day of rest on the seventh day. And so I've been trying to honor that. And it's been a real struggle. When I first started my channel, I was doing pretty good with it, but then so many different schedule changes, adding another new grandbaby and then watching them and constantly making schedule changes means that a lot of times I was still working on Saturday, which always made me feel bad. And we finally came up with a solution that's going to work for now. Hopefully, I'm sure I'll have to rearrange everything again to still have my Saturdays off. But I realized that part of that too has to involve me taking a complete break for a day from YouTube and questions that come in. And that's going to be the hardest one for me, because when I get questions in, I feel like I want to answer them right away, especially if they're very, very important questions. Anyway, I'm saying all this because my goal is to completely stay away from YouTube on Saturdays, to just not have anything to do with it, so I can have a day that's not eaten up with YouTube related things and questions. It doesn't mean I don't care about people, but I do need that mental break. Even though it is time consuming getting in there and answering questions, it's not physical work, but it is mental work. And sometimes it's emotional work, especially when people are upset about something or people are rude or whatever, and I'm in there reading those kind of comments. I don't need that kind of stress. So Saturday has to be my day off. And so I'm just putting this out there. So if you send me an email on a Saturday, or you comment on a video on a Saturday with questions and I don't get back to you, please don't be offended. I promise Sunday mornings I'll get in there and I'll get right back to it and start answering questions in emails. And so just give it time. I'll get back to you as soon as I'm able. And that is if I don't miss your comment entirely. And if it's really important, again, as I always say, send me an email instead, because sometimes comments, this is something I've noticed, even though I try to stay up on them, you know, because all my comments, no matter what video it's on, are in one place. I can see them all in one place in the order that they've come in from newest to oldest. But I've noticed sometimes that comments will come in, may not show up until hours later, and somehow I happen to stumble upon it. It's like, where did this come from? It wasn't here before. And so when that happens, I might miss it entirely. And if I happen to see it, it's a matter of chance. I've stumbled upon comments under videos that were months and years old that I know I never saw, because I know I would have answered them. So if you do not get a reply within a day, or if it's on the weekend by Sunday morning, then I suggest sending me an email. If it's a really important question you need an answer to and nobody else in comments has been able to step up and answer that for you. I mean, I do have a lot of great knowledgeable people, followers, that do kind of step in there and answer questions as well. But anyway, just so you know that. And then one more little tip I wanted to bring up. This is actually something I show in a video that's going to be coming out in a few weeks, where I did 5 ways to save money on pet care. And it was something I just come up with. I'm going to go ahead and show it in this video too, since not everybody watches the 5 ways to save and not everybody watches the this and that videos. And that is, our dog is the type that likes to he loves stuffed animals, but he likes to tear them to shreds into teeny little bits. And his sister's the same way when she's here. So before, it would be like, whenever I get to a garage sale, if I see stuffed animals for real cheap, especially smaller ones, I'd buy them up, making sure to take the little bean bags out of them if there's bean bags in there, and just stock up on them, because yeah, little teeny tiny bits of stuffed animal all over the house. What just suddenly dawned on me, especially since now I'm just do all Darn Tough socks now, and I went back to trying to wear my cheap Chinese made socks, and already they were just, in a short period of time, within just a few days, I'm seeing holes developing on them. And so I'm like, okay, that's it, I give up on them. And so I'm taking them and making them into dog toys by gathering up the little bits and pieces of stuffed animals that Cody and his sister leave laying around the house, and shoving them in a sock and tying off the end. And though eventually he will rip holes in this too, I think I can already see it's going to last longer than the regular stuffed animals. I notice he's not as likely to try to tear this to shreds. He'll fling it around, he'll shake it, he'll do all that kind of stuff. He'll play tug of war with it, but he's not tearing it to teeny tiny bits. And since it's already got the pieces of the stuffed animals in there, not only was I able to clean them up, it's got that smell in there that he already knows because he's been chewing on it. So that makes him more likely to play with it. So there's a little life hack to save you some money. You've got some old socks that you don't wear, just shove bits of whatever in there and tie off the end. You got a cheap toy. If they do have a hole in it though, you might have to tie off both ends. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my this and that for the week, and any thoughts or suggestions or ideas or questions you have, please put them in comments down below and I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.